Welcome to number 5 in our series of 7 webinars. It's Farming Together, Learning Together series. Tonight we're really excited to bring you Love Thy Neighbour, Neighbouring Farms Joining Forces. And we've got 3 fabulous presenters for you tonight. They're all farmers, 2 of them are neighbours. And one of the things that I think speaks to us very loudly at Farming Together about this webinar tonight is that it talks about the power of collaboration and the importance of regenerating the landscape. 2 key things that we see as very important for the future of not only agriculture but the landscape and the country as well. So our 3 speakers tonight, our first speaker is Glenn Chapman, who's the CEO of Southern Blue Regenerative. And our other 2 speakers are actually farming neighbours. We have Rachel Ward, who's a farmer, actor, writer and director, and her neighbour Mick Green, who's also a farmer, who will share their collective stories. So welcome again, everyone. It's great to see so many people that are interested in such an important topic, and I really look forward to hearing the presentation. Welcome, Glenn. I'll hand over to you.
Welcome, everybody. And thank you, Simone and Amanda, for inviting me along to talk tonight. Just a quick intro for myself. As I said, I run Southern Blue Regenerative, and we're an education and consulting training company, as well as we have our farms part of our operation. The farm, we're only a small farm, 65 hectares. We run sheep and cattle. We're doing boxed meat direct to customers within our local region. And our education stuff, I've been involved with regenerative farming, sustainable farming for more than 20 years. Worked for some of the other major consulting firms, and have been running our own courses and things for the last 4 or 5 years. We do a lot of tour work, and we've taken tours. This bottom picture here is a tour group with Joel Salatin in the States that we took a number of years ago. So we do that so we can expose people to a whole range of regenerative stuff. But for tonight, talking about our experience with working and collaborating with neighbours. I suppose I grew up always collaborating with neighbours. My father and grandfather were always sharing tractors and doing all sorts of stuff around the region. And I remember as a kid driving the tractor up and down the road to the neighbours to lend them the tractor or borrow the trailer or whatever else. For us, when we purchased our property, we've only got 65 hectares, as we said. And our two neighbours, and we've got a road on one side and 2 neighbours, are 2 large corporate neighbours. One's 2,500 acres and one's 13,000 hectares, sorry. So they're quite large, very different priorities, very different budgets to what we've got. But we have, and right from the start when we bought it, we've tried to work with those guys on a very collaborative basis, so that we're communicating all the time on boundary fences and stock and pest control and all those sorts of things. But I just wanted to share one specific thing that we've done with one of our neighbours, the smaller of the 2, and that was with regards to a floodgate and boundary fencing that we had to do. As I said, because they're larger corporates, they've got a different priority to us. We've only got a small budget. We've got our budget pretty much set for each year on our fencing and everything else. But there was one floodgate that was pretty interesting one. This, just to give you a reference, this is the Chandler River, east of Armidale, and our boundary here, it's a give and take boundary with the river. And at the moment, we actually have most of the river in our place. But this river, especially this time of the year, we've got storms coming through right now, can actually be a raging torrent bank to bank across where the green area is in the bottom. So floodgates are very difficult to maintain within this area. So in this little section, there was a floodgate across where that red line was, and it was constantly being washed out. It was bits of barbed wire and electric tape and all sorts of bits and pieces that kept getting washed down, and we've had to clean up the river to get rid of a lot of it that's been there for many, many years. So our neighbour, Charlie Coventry, and I got together. He came and sort of said, well, we need to sort it out because he needed to be able to more effectively graze these hills on the other side. And we were looking at where we might be able to relocate the floodgate. And this pool here was perfect, but that actually then took in a fair bit of our country, and that's a pool that we use for some of our tourism operations on the farm. So, but we came up with a solution that rather than change the give and take, so one of us lose and one of us gain, we actually came up with a solution where we could both gain in a way from this. So on our side of it, we're actually looking at changing the boundary so it comes down into the top side of this pool where the blue lines are. What it actually, and I'll show you the aerial, is that where the original floodgate is, where that yellow is, and the red lines, the dotted line, is now where the boundaries will be between us, but it's a shared grazing paddock. What it did is it gave us a pool at the top and a pool at the bottom for us to do some really easy floodgates. But instead of one of us losing, one of us gaining, we came up with this so that this paddock in here is actually shared for us both to graze, and we've got an agreement to graze that on year-about basis. So the other part of this, which is quite good from a working with a different size operation, is we're responsible for the fence on our side and they're responsible for the fence on their side. So it's not, if they want to replace it and, put in a major fence, then they can. As long as we maintain ours in a stroke-proof format, then everybody's happy. So to get this going, we had a couple of on-site discussions. We wandered around, we looked up and down, probably 2 or 3 times on site, mapped out this option, and collectively put together just a 1-page agreement document that just outlines what the lot numbers are, who's responsible for what parts of it, when we were going to put our components up, and the grazing availability of that from year in and year out. So, and we made sure that that agreement was related to the actual lots. So if one of us sell or something happens, then it goes on for the next owners, because give and take boundaries are quite common in rural areas. And we do a bit of mapping with a lot of people, and a lot of people who are new to rural land don't actually understand what give and take boundaries are and how they work. But so this simple agreement, no solicitors really involved. It's 2 collaborative and professional farmers just getting together and being sensible about what we're doing. Charlie's actually part of a company structure, so he has to dot the I's and cross the T's as far as what he does. But this agreement's simple. We both know what we're doing, and everybody's happy. And so now that fencing's coming up, and we actually are able to utilise some of that paddock now for our grazing. I suppose the other things that we, just from a collaboration point of view, do beyond just our farmers is collaborating out in the community. So we run training programs and we have field days. We'll have one on our farm next week. And when we're doing those, we utilise the village store to do the catering and things for our guests. And we like to do that because we want to support that local community. We live very close to the village, and having that hub within the village there is really important for that community, and we like to support it so we can make sure it gets turned on. We do a lot of work with Southern New England Land Care and the land care groups within the area, and whenever we're looking at workshops or or they are looking for places to host their training programs and things, and we're happy to do that. We're just in the last few weeks working with another boxed vegetable company in Armidale, and we've formed the Organic and Regenerative Food Producers. It doesn't have any structure at the moment, but it's just a collaboration within the Armidale area to try and get more food operators and local producers together so that we can help each other work out where the gaps in the market are, and improve the delivery of produce and stuff for the local market, and so help each other. Carrying on for that, one of the things we've done with our boxed meat business, we've only just got that going in the last couple of months, but what we've done within the region is we're partnering with the whole food stores in the region and using them as our pickup hubs. So our customers come to us to pick up their boxes. We don't go and deliver to their homes. And so we actually host those at those whole food stores so that when people come to pick up their box of meat, they're more likely to go into that store and actually, purchase and do their whole shop. So they've all got fruit and veg and things like that in there. Some of those are also buying some meat from us wholesale. But it really, it works quite well in that they're out promoting our product. We're promoting them as well. And it's a real focus around the local manner of what we're doing. So that's sort of, just in a nutshell, a quick story of what we're doing. But, there's all sorts of ways that we can work. And the idea of collaborating with our neighbours, I think I had a slide back there earlier. We also borrow machinery from our neighbours. We don't have a tractor on the farm. We've only had the place for the last 3 years, and the capital investment in a tractor is quite large. But Charlie has, 2 big John Deeres with buckets and everything on them, so he's quite happy for us to borrow that. We maintain that machinery when we borrow it. We provide some labour and contract labour between the two of us when he needs help. We've also had offers, and we've offered adjustment to neighbouring properties as well, so that we've got, when we don't have enough stock or we've got excess feed, we can do that. The livestock impact opportunity was an interesting one in that there was another producer that we knew that was on the long paddock recently, and we saw an opportunity for them to overnight stock in a paddock and get some animal impact into a paddock. So we had 350 head of cattle in a hectare and a half hectare for 12 to 16 hours. So for them, it gave them another place. We help water, provide the water and everything for them. And for us, we got some experimentation and some animal impact in an area as well. So that's the sorts of different ways we can collaborate, and we just make sure that we have a good working relationship with our neighbours, because there's things that always come up, and especially with bushfires and wild dog control and all these sorts of things that we need to know what each other's doing, and so we talk to each other on a regular basis, and we keep those communication channels open, and the shared paddock we've got is just a small example of something that was mutually beneficial for us. So that's all I've got, Simone.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Glenn. Such an interesting and valuable story. I'm sure we'll have some questions from the floor. So if anyone would like to pop a question in the chat box, or as I said, you can raise your hand, use one of the Zoom functions, and we can get some mics onto it if you like. I'm going to make a start if that's okay, Glenn. I knew I'd have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
You talked just at the end there, and it did come up a bit earlier for me, around good working relationships, and you mentioned communication. Are there other, do you think there's other skills or other qualities that really foster and enable those good relationships to flourish?
Well, just being open to communicate, I suppose, is sometimes I think people are worried about, especially with, we're only 65 hectares and these major corporate neighbours, who are we to, be talking to them and whatever else. But we've got boundary fences and things that we border onto them. And so to just pick up the phone and say good day, and when we bought the place, that's what we did. Our previous owner didn't necessarily have good relations with some of the neighbours, but we just sort of went, well, we're going to do this differently. And so right from the start, we were proactive in introducing ourselves, talking to them, and just regularly catch up and say good day. We've actually We've also purchased surplus fencing equipment from one of the neighbours as well. They had Kiwi Tech stuff that, rather than us ordering it, they had some surplus stuff. So there's all sorts of opportunities that come up if you communicate. That Kiwi Tech purchase saved us probably about 30% on the purchase cost of stuff that we could have ordered directly. They had ordered a big lot, didn't need any more, so it was sitting there. But they're also looking at what we're doing from a Regenerative point of view. We've got different management styles, and we look at what they're doing. They deal with a lot bigger mobs of cattle and things than we do, so we've got things that we can learn from what they're doing. And they're starting to look over the fence at what we're doing. So unless you've got that communication open, there's not an opportunity for people to sort of say, well, hang on, how are you doing it? How are you handling that problem? Or, what's happening with that weed? Because, unless we go beyond the whole that we're managing in our business and our farm to how we interact with those around us, we won't survive. Charlie and Ackhill, for example, are uphill from us. So every time it rains, rain comes down the hill onto our place. So there's all these interactions that happen. The river flows from theirs down into us. So, he's always concerned about weeds coming down. So we're monitoring that. We let them know, those sort of things. So I think communication is just that key, and just to step up and say, g'day, here I am. If you don't know something, just go, look, I'm new to this. I don't know what I don't know about that. Can you help me? And people will generally go, yep, we'll give you a hand. That's fine.
Amazing. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? You just, oh my gosh, we just communicate and it all works out. But it is such a key to relationships. So I completely agree.
Yeah.
We've got a question in the chat from Michelle. Is there any chance that your huge neighbours will downsize?
I don't know. We've made indications that if they did want to downsize a little bit, there was some section next to us that we'd be interested in having a look at purchasing. I think from Ackhill and Charlie's point of view, I think they're because they've got a partnership with Wool Grower in Italy as part of that operation. So they've got a pretty clear focus on what they're doing and a scale of operation that works efficiently for them. The other neighbour, which is Wallamombi and Geogla stations, that's very large corporate owned, and they've got a lot of other diverse investments, and for them, the property is part of their investment portfolio. So, but those properties are always, changing hands. We've had a number in the district that have changed hands. So I'm not sure whether they'll downsize, but there's still plenty of other places around. Like we are one of, within 5 kilometres of us, there would be another 6 or 7 properties that would be less than 100 hectares in size that are being part of. And I know from my parents' property, which is west of Gyra, we're one of the major, last sort of major properties in the area. We've got 7,000 acres there. And when we purchased that property 40 years ago, we had, I think, 5, maybe 6 neighbours. And now we have 26 neighbours. So all those properties around us have divided and split up. So when you're in that situation and you've got 26 neighbours, then knowing who they are and if you've got a problem, because, all sorts of things happen, neighbours' dogs and, stray pet sheep and, all sorts of things can happen. But having that community so that who's doing what and generally and getting together is really important, because, stock turn up and you don't know where they're from, and they could be, any one of those people. And biosecurity these days is really critical for us to make sure we've got a handle on. So, that's part of that as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Linda's asked how you went in the bushfires.
We were fine. Wasn't near us at all, but was within probably 5 or 10 kilometres of us. My brother-in-law's property was directly affected within a couple of 100 metres of their house. So, but all that country, that's the Cathedral Rocks area. And it's slowly recovering, but they've got sections on their property where it was, because it was so dry leading into the bushfires, and they were quite intense, that it's had some fair impact on it. So, so I see this question there from Scott.
Yeah, communication sounds key, but what would be the ramifications if your neighbours didn't share your regen approach? Would you anticipate your property would be adversely affected by the use of chemical intervention if they were more industrial in their farming methods?
Yeah, well, our neighbours, I wouldn't say they're not probably regenerative. Their focus is not on regeneration. Their focus is on profit, because of their corporate nature. But they are still have, and inherently most producers have a focus on looking after their land. We do have a different approach to them. You know, they are using sprays to look at controlling African lovegrass directly across the fence from us. We've got a patch that's, you know, on our side of the fence, you know, within 10 metres of either side of the boundary fence. They've sprayed theirs. We're looking at using composts and cover crops and things to see whether we can have an impact on ours, and we're using our biological monitoring process to see whether our decisions are actually moving that forward. Now, again, it was just communication. When he was on the post the other day, I just talked to him about it, and I said, "Oh, look, this is what we're trying." And he went, "Oh, that's interesting. I'll be really keen to see how that works," because inherently I can be very confident that they would want to reduce the cost of how much they're spraying on their property, regardless of the impact on the environment. From a cost point of view, their motivations might be different, but the outcome might be the same in the end. So we're very careful with our discussions with any of our neighbours, and I really don't like fence line photos, because they don't show you a really good example, and you don't know the context or the situation that different properties are in at different times. And yeah, we've got a monitor of one of our fence lines just for our own use, but we know that we both graze them at different times and different intensities. So, you know, doing things like making sure you don't put those things out on social media and stuff. And it's about just talking and saying, well, look, here's an idea. This is what we're doing. We're experimenting. We're giving it a go. This is what we're doing when we're monitoring it, which is one of those keys, is to make sure that whatever decisions we make, we monitor, so that we know we're actually going to be progressing in the right direction. So, but I do know of some other people we're working with that have got like timber plantations right next to them, and the timber plantation is uphill and it's just been clear felled. And they're not the type of organisation you could really talk to. So you've got to sort of take account of that in your own management and planning, so that you can say, well, actually, when you're doing your planning of your whole under management, that's an influence from outside. How are we going to manage it? What are we going to do? Do we need to put buffer zones in? You know, those sorts of things. So, but yeah, we're here to sort of showcase what we're doing and give people ideas. So we try and treat it that way, and not what you're doing is wrong and what we're doing is right, because I don't think either of us are maybe right or wrong. It's we're all learning where we're going.
That's an excellent philosophy. It's one of my favourites, actually. No right or wrong, just learning, because it's so true.
Well, there's a good quote we have in our presentations that we have that there's no right and wrong in nature. There's just consequences.
Yes, and perhaps a very good one for parents as well, I think.
Yeah. So it's, you know, you can do things different ways, and nature will react to what you're doing.
Yeah, spot on. And maybe in different time frames to what we're used to, but it's always there. Yeah.
And that nature includes our neighbours and us. We're part of that natural system. So the consequences of what we do, you know, there's no right or wrong about it, but there'll be an outcome, and we need to monitor those outcomes. So if we communicate in a particular way and it didn't work, then try it differently next time. Do something differently, you know.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much, Glenn. We might leave it there for the moment, but if anyone else has any questions they think of during the space of the next presentation, feel free to come back in the next Q&A section. And I'll hand over to you, Amanda, if you want to introduce our next guests.
Sure, Simone. Thank you. I just quickly wanted to add that I think, Glenn, I'm getting a sense it's not just about your frequent communication, but it's also your ability to find common and shared interests rather than dividing your neighbours that may have something to do with why you seem to get on so well with all of your neighbours.
Yeah, we've got an article that we're about to publish on community thinking and individual thinking. And it's a concept that a colleague, a friend of mine and I were just asking, and we sort of talk, we all become individual thinkers when we look at what's the impact on me and how's this going to happen. But then there are, and I tend to be one of these as a community thinker, and I'm always looking and saying, well, if I make a decision, who else is it going to impact, or how can I bring more people in to get a result from this? So we've actually got an article that's just being published at the moment that we'll put out through our newsletter and through the Holistic Management Educators newsletter as well.
Fantastic. Make sure you share that with us, please. I'd love to read it. Thank you, Glenn. And now I'd like to welcome our two neighbouring farmers to talk about their shared experience, Rachel Ward and Mick Green. Hand over to you.
So
thank you very much.
Hello. Are you happy to make a bit of a start in telling us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, you go first, Rachel.
Oh, you go
first.
first.
Okay, I don't mind. Well, it's pretty hard act to follow, Glenn, but thanks for all that, mate. I guess I have to start by just saying where we've come from, and I started out farming with my father, and we do all the things, share tractors, neighbouring farms, but we just grew to a point where he didn't want to go on the regenerative path, and I did. So I just had to make an exit from that relationship. I still work actively with him all the time, and I love him to bits and want to help him and see him succeed, even though it's not in a regenerative way, but it gives me a conventional benchmark to measure ourselves against. And so that being said, I've had the good fortune of being employed by Rachel and Brian on their beautiful property, which is neighbouring farm to mine. And there was also a couple of other people that are key in how our arrangement sort of came about. One is Darren Newbury, a good friend of mine, and Sarah Schmuter. She was also a neighbouring farm, so there was an extra farm, but her house was burnt out in the bushfires pretty bad, and Sarah's sold her property, so she's no longer in our collaboration, unfortunately. But yeah, she was kind of key in helping us get all that started and a lot of the ideas off the ground, sort of thing. That now our farms together at the moment, they're about 346 hectares, and we have amalgamated our cattle herd together. I had less cattle than the Browns, obviously, but I have less land as well. But we have been able to push our rotation out longer, which has given us bigger rest periods, gives us more animal density. So yeah, that's really how it sort of came about. I used to manage all the land when it was all separate, but I found myself working extra hard and to look after all these different mobs of cattle. So now the cattle are all together, that workload has actually decreased. There's less fences and less water to worry about. There's just one main mob, and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, we've done a fair bit of infrastructure and water infrastructure, fencing, but at the moment it's actually really starting to gain a bit of traction now for us. So how's that for a start?
It's a great start, Mick. Thank you. I've already got some questions, but also, did you want to keep going, Rachel?
Yes, hello, and thanks everyone for joining, and great Glenn, great to see you. Glenn's been helping us with some consultancy. And I just keep thinking how bloody blessed I am to have Mick as a neighbour, because he basically introduced me to this whole idea, this holistic way of farming. And he came to us about 2 years ago and just said, this is ridiculous. You know, I'm doing the same thing on my farm as you're doing, but and it seems like we're just doubling up on everything. And let's follow this idea, this regenerative idea. Let's join our herds. Let's break our paddocks into smaller planned grazing and have a go at this. What do you think? And I've sort of really been quite hands off as a farmer. We've had the farm for 35 years, and having sort of off farm incomes and careers, very much left it in the hands of managers, of which one was Mick's father, who did, you know, a beautiful job managing our property for about 10 years. And before that, it was the man who we bought the property off, then turned around and managed the property. So just continued with what he'd been doing. And I wasn't really a particularly interested or responsible custodian, because I basically handed over to whoever was managing, and I didn't really have a clue about what. I knew that we loved our farm. We had wonderful times there, but I didn't take a responsibility really. I didn't recognize how complex. I mean, I didn't really acknowledge the soil, really. I had no concept of it being a sort of a living entity. I mean, I was far more focused on the cattle and the prices we got for the cattle and how good the cattle looked and how good our property looked aesthetically. And really Mick opened, and Darren Newbury completely opened my eyes to what was going on underneath the surface, and sort of just absolutely introducing me to this whole world, the world of farming, really, which I just feel more and more blessed every day, because I'm just so motivated and inspired and excited by the challenges and by what we can do on farm and with the environment to you know, with introducing greater biodiversity, holding water, pulling carbon, all of those things that just at first just seemed too good to be true. But I have to say, the more I learn, the more I go on to webinars, the more I listen to podcasts, the more I go down the rabbit hole, the more absolutely I feel so rescued by it, actually, because I felt such an sort of almost existential despair, really, about the world and about the lack of action and about my impotence, really, to do anything really positive about, you know, sort of throwing myself into the solutions. And when Mick proposed this, and I read Charlie Massey's book, Call of the Reed Warbler, it was like a life raft coming along. And I went, this is something that I can not only join in because I have a farm, but I can join in because I'm a consumer, and I can use the power of my purse and what I buy to support the farmers that are best practice farmers in my books. So that's where we are, and we continue to learn. We look at Glenn like, what wouldn't it be? One day we'll get to his level of knowledge. And I think the great thing about doing it together, Mick and I, is you know, Mick's certainly more been doing it for longer and reading about it for longer, but we are kind of newbies. And so we're excited, like almost two kids in second grade, you know, who are like just sort of still knocked out by what we're finding in our paddocks. And Mick says, come and look at this. I haven't seen this before. And this is new. And this is what's changing. And then we get setbacks, like we did some monitoring the other day and our water took forever to go through. And we'd had the land to market verification process going on. And we'd had one field that it just, the water had disappeared in seconds. And we thought, oh, we're home and dry. We're there. And then we did our monitoring and we were still sitting there after 10 minutes with the water not going through. So, you know, and we're in, like Glenn said, we just haven't had the rain, enough rain lately, and we just see it, we see ourselves getting drier and drier. So nothing changes. We're still farmers praying for rain.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks,
Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. Do you want to add some more there, Mick?
No, I just on the you know, Rachel said she's blessed, but I feel I'm blessed because, you know, Glenn touched on it before about communication, and that's one thing that Rachel brings to our collaboration in spades. You know, she's a great communicator, you know, and she's got so many things that I don't have in my toolkit. So it's just another example of how you know, good collaborations, you know, really pay dividends.
Yes, and I don't know, it's a sort of such a tricky thing, isn't it? Because anything can go wrong at any moment, you know, it's sort of with collaborations and when you've got such investment together and when you're sort of stumbling through it a little bit. And it's just, I suppose, you know, it's sort of so essential to keep the mutual respect going and also bringing different things to the party. I mean, I think Mick and I are together greater as, you know, we're greater as a whole together than we are singly. And I think that, you know, as long as I think we can still sort of equally bring things. I mean, Mick does all the farming. Mick is the one who's completely up to speed with regen methodologies and practices, and I sort of, and I can bring, because I've got off farm income, I can support a lot of the ideas and maybe move it forward faster than we might have been able to do it otherwise. But I think it's such a unique and exciting thing that we happen to be, you know, Mick manages, but he has a farm beside me. So we are walking this together.
I know you said before, you know, you're both newbies in the field, so to speak, and it's an interesting space to be newbies, I think, because there are so many people wanting to make this transition and to go through that process themselves. And quite often I know that people can be a bit hesitant to share their stories when they're in infancy because they get worried that what if it's not a success? What if it doesn't work out? And I think that's something really powerful about you sharing your journey at this early stage, is to share what the process is like now, so people can get a very real and tangible idea about what it looks like in practice in those early beginnings, rather than from someone who's maybe got the wealth of experience down the track, which is equally valuable, don't get me wrong, but to be able to connect with people who are at the start of their journey, I think is a really powerful part of your story. So again, we really appreciate that you've both come on to share that part.
Simone, I'll just interject there, sorry, because that is one big thing with people starting out, is they tend to look at, you know, the gurus and those people that are probably, you know, might be 30 years down the track and go, well, I want to do that tomorrow. But every one of us have gone on a journey of beginning to understand what we don't know and starting to implement things and trial things. And each of our journeys is different, and we can't expect to jump way ahead. And if we start to do that, that's when we can make some big problems for ourselves. but be confident that those little, we'll call them failures, are important for us to learn and to move forward. But don't try and look at someone that's 30, 10, 20 years down the track and go, well, I'll do that tomorrow, because it doesn't work that way.
Absolutely, Glenn. And I think also I love the reality of hearing of obviously the power of collaboration, but also the messiness of it too, because it's not necessarily always an easy thing to do. And as Rachel said, you're sort of both stumbling along together, and there's going to be points there where there's a lot of tension, but finding a way to work through and navigate through, I imagine underpinned by, it sounds like, a lot of trust and mutual respect and a long-term foundation and relationship there, and working towards that shared goals where you can actually see the benefits. Why are we doing this? The power of doing this together. So I think that's important, the reality of it as well. It can be messy.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things in starting that communication is, rather than trying to tell someone all about what you're doing, is the first step is to really try and find and understand what they're doing. The more we understand about someone's motivation or their reasoning, or what, just to learn about their management system, allows you to find that common ground that you can then use as the steps to move forward when you're communicating with them and working together on projects. And it might be just one little project. You go, okay, well, we're like ours, fixing the floodgate, which means that we're walking over each other's properties going, oh, well, what are you doing here? I see you put these fences split here and you've got different troughs and stuff, and we can talk about that. And an example that just like that is when we're putting in our fence in, Charlie come on and he said, oh, I see you got all those temporary gates. So we went down that track with temporary gates with their Kiwi Tech, and he said, if I did it again, I'd put in permanent gates, because I spend more time maintaining temporary gates than it will cost me putting in permanent gates. So there's a huge learning for me to go, oh, okay, because the cost of the gate can be a fair cost. But when, from his experience, amortizing that cost for the maintenance, and if we don't talk about those common things, we can't talk about the things that might challenge each other.
It's a great point, Glenn, and it speaks to a comment we've got in the chat from, I think, Jean Gabriel. He said, well said, Rachel, we too have seen the light, but we feel holier than thou with our conventional neighbours, and we need some degree of humility. So I think that's exactly what you're saying there, Glenn, is, through that understanding, and it does enable those relationships to go much deeper than just surface level, where one's better than the other, and the understanding that everyone's got different experiences and different contributions to bring.
Yeah, and their different contexts and their different financial situations and different family situations and different, communities and land, and that's this complex thing that we all, operate in. It's there is no simple solution to it. It is messy, as everybody said.
Well, one of the things also that was very novel to me in a way was I did the holistic management course with Brian Welberg. Hello, Brian. I think you're out there. And one of the things we learned to do, or we talked about doing, was writing up our context, which is, trying to express what your values are and how you see yourself going forward and what you want to encompass. And it didn't just take on board the production entity or the environmental entity, it took on board the social entity, which hadn't really occurred to me before. And, a lot of them, and Brian would talk about the fact that, well, it's no point being a little isolated, holier than thou person sitting on your little square patch. Everybody is connected. All your neighbours are connected, and their neighbours are connected with them. And it made me really think about our little community in Utungan and how deeply connected we are, particularly when we had the fires. We had you know, and we were all majorly affected by the fires, and we needed each other so much. And all of my neighbours were out there fighting the fires and contributing, and the ladies were in the hall providing the sandwiches and the water and the reprieve. And you just realised how grateful and how much you needed each other in that regard. And this year we're having a big Christmas party, and all the neighbours are coming, and it's in a way it's a sort of an essential thing to do. And I can't imagine being on the farm and being isolated in your little tiny bit. I can't imagine, not that we have done it, but I can't imagine why we haven't done it.
It's just frozen there a little bit, Rachel. You might drop back in a minute.
Impacts on us, on each other. So, you know, we're infinitely connected. So we might as well find a way that we can all communicate and talk about this in case there are any, you know, differences.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Rachel. We've worked with farmers working together for the last 5 years, and that if there's anything that we've seen, it's, you know, there's a lot of farmers out there that are isolated or feeling isolated, but the power that you can get from coming together, and we need to do it more.
Yeah.
I got a really simple little story. Where I grew up with where my parents farm, we used to have regular tennis matches with the local community, and we'd have a once a month church service and things in one of the person's houses and things like that. And there was a couple of key people that sort of kept that going. And when they retired off the farm, some of that sort of disappeared. But my dad and 2 or 3 of his neighbours formed up to start playing golf together in Guyra. And so they had their golf team. They were just playing twilight golf. It was pretty casual, everything else. And one of the neighbours was a bloke I went to school with. He's a year or so younger than me, but he was a real workaholic on the farm. You know, he was working 7 days a week, working for his own properties as well as working for other places around him, trying to, you know, buy places and things. And Dad invited him along to play golf, and he'd never played golf before, but he invited him along and said, "Come and play golf. We'll have a few beers, and you know, we'll have a chat and walk around the golf course." About 5 years on, we were at a party together, and he called me aside and he said to me, "If your dad hadn't have actually come and asked me to go and play golf with him, I don't know where I would have been now." But because for him, that connection then with the other blokes that he had, because he was really isolated in his work. And it was something that took him off the farm to do something that was very casual, no pressure, and, you know, meant a huge thing to him from a mental health point of view. And now that they've got quite a community of people that they continue to play golf with, and their team's all farmers. So it's you know, having that connection, like Rachel was saying, with her community that came together around the bushfire, you know, trying to find those and foster them is really important.
We've got another comment in the chat around that actually as well, Glenn, from Carol. "Oh, for a neighbour like you, Nick. We have been raising Angus cattle for over 40 years, but have neighbours who want to do their own thing, right down to one who declare themselves organic and biodynamic, but merely stop drenching their cattle. Need more land than we have in order to justify the fencing and water points required. We should be retired, but would love to see more of this happening close to us in the Adelaide Hills."
Yeah, you know, I guess Glenn might be more qualified to talk on some of those ones, but I really get excited thinking about the collaborations that could be out there. You know, I see here on the East Coast anyway, there's so much subdivision, and you know, with decentralisation, you've got people coming out of the city and less, you know, possibly less active farmers, but the need for regenerative farmers on this land is paramount. You know, all these little 5 and 10 acre blocks could be so utilised, but yet, you know, everyone's buying a zero turn mower and mowing spending the half their weekend mowing it. You know, there could be a farmer next door, and you could just say, look, you look after the fences and you include this in your rotation, job done. And, you know, how much better for the environment is that than, you know, I think I heard figures in the US, there was something like 30 million acres of lawn. So, you know, all mechanically mowed, irrigated, fertilised. If we could just, you know, invite the regenerative farmers in, and it wouldn't matter how small, you'd be surprised how small a paddock you can make things work. You know, I don't think size, like my farm's about the same size as Glenn's farm, but here I am with a bigger neighbour giving me a bit more clout. So yeah, I definitely think it's you know, keep your eyes open for all your neighbours.
Yeah. I love hearing this, Mick. We've actually just been working with a community group, and this is exactly one of the things that's been spoken about as an opportunity, and it's got such potential. There's a lot of landholders out there who they do want to look after their land, but they don't know how to do it, and they're neighbouring farmers who are sort of looking for the opportunity to farm more land and combine that with regenerative practices. What a fantastic solution. Yeah,
no, it's brilliant.
Gets me excited too.
And there's more than that too. There's, you know, I'm quite passionate about seeing young people get a leg up into farming. It's no good keeping it all to ourselves. We have to start planning succession now. And all our ageing farmers, they need a gate opener. They need young kids that are excited about agriculture, sitting in the truck with them, learning all the things they, you know, that they need to be taught, as well as some new stuff. But yeah, we just need to collaborate more effectively and on many different levels.
Yeah, Mick, I'm the same. You know, we're looking at trying to find opportunities where we can bring younger people on to do stuff, and I get inquiries on a regular basis now from people going, well, look, I want to get started in this. How do I get started? Do you know farms that I can go and work on? You know, I'm happy to work for free because I'm going to learn. You know, so I think there's organisations like Young Farm Connect, and Joel and Tony Brown who help facilitate that, and I've got networks right across Australia, and I think that's a really good way of getting younger people together to collaborate. But I think the missing part is linking them with, you know, people like Mick, you know, who's really willing to share and teach and learn and teach that person so they can learn, and just teeing them up. You know, that's probably the bit that's missing, and how we can facilitate that and make it really effective. So I saw there was a question about water retention.
Yeah, there's one from Nikki Cooper there. It says, hi, I'm curious about how you monitor the water retention in the soil. Doing this job alone with your neighbour must be a great bonding and learning experience.
I have to say, it was one of the best days I've had in a long time. My day with Mick, where we were pacing out our 10 meters and banging in the stakes, and then sitting on the ground counting the number of grasses, which didn't take very long at the moment, but by, you know, in about 3 years it's going to take us a lot longer. And then sort of just and monitoring the water, and it was just, we were so absorbed in this 10 square meters of land, and you just sort of, it was such an opportunity to sort of get to know it intimately. And I sort of have such a different perspective of it now. I just feel I know. And then I would make assessments about how much food I thought was in that little square meter. And then Mick would put his hands in and separate the grasses, and there would be this bit of bare soil. And it was, I don't know, it was just a wonderful thing to do together, and to just have your land sort of bond you in a way, just have your land give you such common ground. You know, I sort of felt his deep affection for it, and I hope he felt my deep affection for it. And it was, yeah, it was a very, really lovely bonding day of such absorption. It was ridiculous. I mean, I sort of afterwards pinched myself that we basically spent all day sitting in the grass, picking up the cow poo, looking at whether the beetles had come back. And it was just, I just now can't imagine a better way to spend a day.
So Nikki, specific to your question, so what Rachel was doing, part of the land to market and the holistic management training we do is doing biological monitoring, doing landscape function monitoring, so that we can make sure that the decisions that we're making around changing our management or doing things differently is actually moving us in the right way. So there's a checklist that you can go through, and what Rachel's talking about is, you know, creating a transect. You walk out along that and you actually count how many plants you've got and look at soil capping and things. For the water infiltration, what you do is you get a 100 mil piece of PVC pipe, about 4 or 5 inches tall, and screw that into the ground so it seals on the ground, and half fill it with some water, and measure how long it takes that water to infiltrate into your soil. And it gives you an indication of the porosity of your soil, how much organic matter is there, and you know, how much, you know, if you get rainfall, how quickly can it go in. It's really good to give it as, you know, do that as a benchmark, and then as Rachel and Mick are doing, you do that on a regular basis, you know, every 12 months or so, to see what's improving. Is the water infiltrating faster? Is it different in different paddocks because you're doing something different in those areas? You know, there are going to be geology differences with the soil, but if you get a benchmark and then monitor that as you go, you can see how it improves. So really simple tool that you can do. And there's a little, I did a video on our Instagram this week about setting up our little monitoring spots, and I'll actually be doing a field walk with our local land care group next Wednesday. So I'll actually video that as well. So we'll put that up so people can have a look at it, and I'll go through the sheets and everything else.
Great, thank you.
And that's land to market, isn't it, Glenn? That does the verification process that you were talking about.
So Land to Market Australia is run by the Australian Holistic Management Cooperative, and they have a process called environmental outcome verification, where they work with farmers to come on and set up monitoring, both long-term and short-term monitoring sites. And it has a very rigorous measurement process which gets collated through the US through one of the universities, so it's independently verified, and measures you as a baseline, and then 12 months and 5 years measures how you're performing against that. And as you are verified as regenerating and improving your landscape function and regenerating your land, you can actually use the EOV Land to Market verified logo to say that you're actually you're producing that. Maloon Creek farms have just been verified in Australia as one of the first farms that have been verified. They're actually regenerating the land, and there's a number of commercial partners that the Land to Market in Australia are bringing on board for distributing product and things like that out around. So from a holistic management point of view, when we do the training and the course, we teach a basic biological monitoring process which mirrors the same type of process. So you can do it yourself, and then once you get to a point where you go, well, okay, I want to actually verify this and be part of that program, you can join the co-op and you can be independently verified in that process.
Brilliant, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, I'm sure lots of people find that really useful. Carol's just popped another question in. Most of our soils need more organic matter. Top soils too exposed, graze too hard, often unintentionally at wrong time of year. Summer's much hotter, winter's colder, no growth. What would you suggest to increase microbial activity at lowest cost?
Ground cover. Maintaining ground cover is the key. Like whether it's litter or it's whatever else, that's the first step. the second step is living roots and keeping living green plants in there as long as possible. So we're Northern Tablelands. Our property is at 960 metres. We get an average of 45 frost days a year. We got frost down to -8 this season, and I had 6 taps freeze and bust just one night. So, you know, we're in the extremes of what happens here in winter. So, but what we did this year from a low cost point of view, and it's a bit of an experimentation for us, and it seemed to go well, is we broadcast out a winter turnips and oats into our paddocks, because winter's the time when we've got the least amount of feed that's green and growing. So we don't have a seeder, we don't have a tractor, but so we did some experiment and said, okay, what happens if we bought, and I think we bought something like, I don't know, $60 to $70 worth of oat seed, and we coated that with a homemade compost just to give it some biology on the actual seed, and just broadcast that out. And the first bit was with a little hand spinner, you know, garden fertilizer spinner, just walking across the paddock. And we did about 3 or 4 hectares just as a trial. And we got really good results. We got grass growing, and what it actually did for us in maintaining ground cover is it gave our winter pastures, grasses that were there, a bit of less pressure from our grazing, because there was other green things in the paddock for the stock. And then as we came into spring, again, those grasses weren't impacted as high because we had more of the oats and things there. So it's a bit of a trial for us. It seemed to work. You know, we work with a lot of people doing these what we call safe to fail areas, which are small areas you might fence your farm to look at putting high impact animal grazing on a very small area to see what happens and giving it a very long recovery. Or we're working with, you know, dairy farmers and others to say, okay, well, let's try utilising a different management practice in a small area to see what happens and monitor that from a landscape function as well as a production point of view. And that gives you a way of testing things without it making a big impact on your operation. Because everybody's environment's different, and everybody's climate and rainfall and economic situation and social situations are all different. So, you know, what works for us might not work for someone else. But have a go, test it, trial it, set up a little trial area. You know, there's plenty of really good Facebook groups and other groups around where people are sharing their ideas and what they're doing. So
I think it's very important to find other practitioners that are in your area, because where we are in the mid-north coast, we're semi-tropical, so we're very different from places like where Glenn farms. Yeah. And we were connected to other people who were practicing regen in our area through land care field days, land care community meetings. And you can usually find, I mean, we certainly did, we found someone who had many more years experience in the regen and the holistic farming than we had in our area. And so it's fantastic to be able to, you know, to confer with him about if we're worried about, you know, the number of grasses we're getting, or our winter feed not running away or whatever. We very often ring our friend Marlon and ask him how he's doing. And, you know, it's very reassuring. But when we get back, don't worry, I'm dealing with the same problems, or have you tried this, or you know, I know from years of practice that will happen. It will turn the corner. So have faith and hang in there. And I think that really helps reduce the risk that you take when you start out on something like this. And so I would say that, you know, find in your area, and quite, you know, we know how the land changes so radically from one hill to another practically. So if you can find someone who's got the same soil and the same climate, you can usually share your challenges and your successes.
Yeah, I'd also say, and we do a lot of work with our groups like what Rachel, she did a holistic management course, and she's got a graduate group that she gets together on each other's farms, and they regularly meet 3 or 4 times a year to look at what each other's doing. As important as finding someone in your local area that you can see what's happening, it's equally as important to find someone completely outside that does something different, because that's when you open your eyes to, why are they doing that differently, and what's making them do it, and can I apply that in my situation? And that creativity comes from looking at really, really different things. You know, when we do our tour programs, we take people to a whole range of farm types from 1 hectare through to thousands of hectares and all different production, because exactly that, we want to show people huge diversity to open their minds to the possibilities of what can happen. But finding someone in your local area that, like Rachel has, to go, is this normal, is really important for your own mental health, to go that you're not going crazy about something not working.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's Jean Gabriel's just contributed again. We too need to practice diversity, and I'm getting a real sense of that from all our conversations tonight, is just that, you know, absolutely celebrate our differences rather than focus on them as an area for conflict. You know, how can we actually use our differences and our strengths to support each other to have some really amazing outcomes? And having Rachel and Mick both on the call tonight, you can see that level of appreciation and respect they each have for each other, and the strengths that they're bringing to that collaborative partnership and relationship, which has been really a wonderful thing to have on our call tonight.
And it's nice.
I think go, Glenn.
I just going to say it's nice working for them, because I'm learning from them as well as to how they're doing it and what relationship they're doing and how they're working on a joint basis. So
and I think the point that both Rachel and Glenn have made is there's two types of, I guess, working together here that we're seeing that's really effective. And the first one is to have a really close-knit support network around you, to share your ideas, to learn together, to fail in a safe space, but to also have connections and be working with people outside that are doing these diverse things to bring in those new ideas and that innovation. So I think both those kinds of working together relationships are really critical and fundamental for growth and development.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I know we've just gone a little bit over time tonight. I don't know if there's any final words from our guests that they'd like to share with the audience before we sign off.
I'm fine, thanks.
I would just say that, you know, I think one of the things I've experienced, and while regen is still the community, the regen community is incredibly accessible, and it's very and it's so easy to be part of a community that's joined by such sort of a fundamental philosophy, so that everybody really is infinitely interested in this particular area, and it's sort of small enough that you can really feel a sense of belonging in it still. And I sort of almost, although part of me, you know, of course we want it to go much broader, we want it to be taken up on a huge scale, and one of the great things about Australia is we can work with this with obviously our the immense scale of the pastures that are out there. But in a way I will miss the sort of the kind of the collaboration and the sense of belonging that comes with a sort of a new and exciting movement where it is at the moment.
Yeah, that importance of community, isn't it, Rachel? That,
just always looking out there for things that join you, that bond you, that connect you. And sometimes it's very hard to find things that are connecting. I mean, everybody does it in their own way, whether it be, you know, knitting groups or whatever. So certainly for me, it's been a real revelation to find this fabulous community out there of very like-minded people who have who are conscious consumers, I suppose, would be a way to sort of collectivize us in a way. I hope that we all care about what we're eating and what we grow, and to take responsibility for that. And I'm very happy to be walking with my mate Mick.
Yeah, likewise. I'd just like to touch on one thing that Glenn said earlier too, with his conventional neighbours, you know, and you know, how we tread around them and don't alienate them, you know, because they care about the their bottom line, and essentially they'll care about their land, even if they are unwittingly, travelling back. But see, they're probably not doing the monitoring. If they were monitoring their land and just making that one step towards, wow, actually, why is my infiltration going backwards? They would turn around real quick if they thought they could, achieve similar things. But there's plenty of collaborations to be had with conventional guys too. So I'm trying not to step on or make them feel the them and us thing.
Yeah, and Simone, my last thing, leading on from what Mick said, is to be regenerative is a step along a journey. By starting monitoring and making a change in your decision about what you do today or tomorrow, and you are regenerating your land. Like if you focus on ground cover or you start looking at your soil organic, you're regenerating. It's not about particular practices that you'll do or don't use. It's about adhering to the principles of monitoring, thinking holistically, thinking collaboratively, looking at polycultures and things like this. But it's not about whether you spray or don't spray or put fertilizer or don't fertilize. If you, like Mick said, if we monitor and we can say, look, I'm improving my landscape function, I'm improving the quality of the water, I'm improving the soil, improving the quality of the food that's coming up the other end, even if they're in very small incremental steps, then that's a step along being regenerative. You are regenerating and being regenerative. And I think there's too much, well, it's an end point, and if you're not doing this or that, then you're not doing it. But everybody can do it, and they can start tomorrow by making one little change.
Such an important point. Thanks so much, Glenn, and thank you, Mick, and thank you, Rachel. It's been such
my pleasure.
I want to say it's been a very generative discussion and contribution to our series tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and you're getting a huge amount of thanks through the chat box as well. If you want to take a moment to appreciate, everyone's everyone's excitement at your stories, and a lot of appreciation in there too. So
thank you both very much too, and to Southern Cross as well for facilitating this. Fantastic. Good on you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll hand over. Yeah, Amanda, do you want to say anything?
Oh, no, I was just going to reiterate that. It's just been a really inspiring discussion tonight. So thank you so much to our wonderful guests. I also find it's just given a lot of hope. Not that we don't have hope for this future, but just having champions like yourselves with such passion and wisdom and willingness to share your stories and your failures along the way with others. It really reiterates our theme, I think, for this webinar series, which is learning together. And for me, that's really what it's all about. So just a deep and heartfelt thank you for being willing to stand up and share your stories and inspiring us all. So it's just been fantastic, and we look forward to keeping in touch. And I just wanted to make a point, if there's anyone that was listening tonight that does want to get connected more with other regenerative practitioners in the region, feel free to reach out to us at Farming Together. We can help. You've obviously got introductions to our guest speakers tonight, but we'd be really happy to help you find connections to other practitioners in your area. That's what we're all about at Farming Together. This webinar will be recorded, so that will be available on our website, so www.farmingtogether.com.au, and will also be made available on email. Is that right, Simone?
Yeah, you just get an email. You get an email link to the website where you'll be able to find the webinar. It should be up in the next couple of days.
Absolutely. So once again, thanks so much to our great presenters. And I just want to give a little intro into our topic for next week. For those of you who are interested in tuning in, it's the same time, same place next week. And it's 10th of December. Oh my goodness, it's getting pretty close to Christmas, isn't it? So our story for next week, and I just can't see the screen. There we go. We've got our our Noongar Land Enterprise Group, which is an Indigenous group who'll be sharing their stories on Indigenous collaborative farming. So they're an organisation that works with a number of Indigenous farmers across WA. They've got some fascinating stories, and it'll be a really interesting webinar. So we'd love to see you all again next week. And thank you very much for joining us and making it such a fantastic evening. Thanks to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Simone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.